a boy begged not to leave school with his uncle. Suspecting something, the teacher decided to follow them to their house. What she saw when she arrived left her completely horrified. In a small, quiet town, a dedicated teacher named Sophia stumbles upon a troubled boy, Nathan, whose dark home life threatens to unravel everything. As she crosses boundaries to protect him, a web of secrets begins to surface, forcing her to risk everything. Will she be able to save him before it's too late? Every morning, Sophia walked through the schoolyard, feeling both comforted and confined by her routine. She loved seeing her students laugh and play, but lately, something felt off. The crisp autumn air did little to shake the nagging feeling inside her that life had become too predictable. As she watched the kids line up for the swings, Sophia couldn't help but wonder if there was something more she should be doing. Her classroom was always organized and calm, but that order couldn't mask the growing sense of discontent stirring within her. That evening, Sophia sat at her kitchen table, grading papers in the quiet of her small apartment. The familiar routine of her job no longer brought the comfort it once did. As she stared blankly at the papers, her mind wandered to the feeling that had been creeping up on her for weeks, the sense that something was missing. "Is this all there is?" she whispered to herself, closing her eyes for a brief moment. The weight of that thought settled heavily, making it harder to focus on the tasks in front of her. The next day, during lunch, Sophia sat with her colleague Sylvia in the teacher's lounge. Their conversation drifted toward the challenges of teaching, and Sylvia, always insightful, made a casual remark that lingered with Sophia longer than expected. "You know, our job isn't just about teaching them math or reading," Sylvia said thoughtfully. "It's about seeing what others don't, understanding their needs, both emotional and physical." Sophia nodded, but something about those words struck a chord deep within her. She hadn't thought about her role in such a way, but the more she reflected, the more she realized how true it was. As Sophia walked back to her classroom, Sylvia's words echoed in her mind. Had she been overlooking something important with her students? Her heart always guided her to care deeply for them, but this conversation made her rethink just how involved she should be. "Maybe there's more I can do," she mused, glancing at her students who were already seated and waiting for the afternoon lessons to begin. Little did she know, this idea would soon push her to make decisions that would go far beyond her usual responsibilities as a teacher. The following morning, Sophia greeted her class as usual, but something felt different. A new boy had joined her class, introduced quietly by the principal before the day began. His name was Nathan, and right away, Sophia noticed his shy demeanor. He avoided eye contact, sitting in the back of the room, his head down, his clothes a bit too worn for comfort. As the day progressed, Nathan stayed to himself, not engaging with the other students, and something about his quiet nature tugged at Sophia's heart. She decided to keep an eye on him. During recess, Sophia observed from a distance as the children played. Nathan sat alone on a bench, fidgeting with the strap of his backpack. While most of the other kids were sharing snacks and chatting, Nathan pulled out a crumpled piece of bread from his pocket. The sight made Sophia's heart ache. There was something undeniably off, his distant behavior, his ragged clothes, the lonely way he ate. For a moment, she hesitated. Was she reading too much into it? But the nagging feeling persisted, compelling her to act. Later that day, as the students filed back into the classroom, Nathan remained quiet, his head down as always. Sophia couldn't shake the image of him eating alone with that small, sad piece of bread. She wondered if it was just a one-time thing or if there was something more serious going on. Questions swirled in her mind. What was Nathan's home life like? Did his parents know about his behavior at school? These thoughts filled her with concern, but she knew she had to be careful. She didn't want to jump to conclusions. Sophia debated whether to intervene. Part of her wanted to pull Nathan aside and ask him directly if everything was okay, but she also knew how sensitive children could be. She considered going to the school counselor, but she wasn't sure there was enough to report yet. After all, she didn't know his situation. Maybe he came from a modest background and simply needed time to adjust. But as the day wore on, the feeling that something was wrong only grew stronger, and Sophia felt a deeper pull to get involved. As the final bell rang and the children gathered their things, Sophia watched Nathan shuffle out the door, his backpack dragging on the floor. "I'll figure it out tomorrow," she thought to herself, but deep down, she knew that she couldn't wait too long. Something had to be done, and soon. She would find a way to help him, even if it meant stepping outside the boundaries of her usual role as a teacher. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, she would take the first step. A few days later, during art class, something happened that deeply unsettled Sophia. The students were working on a group project, painting large posters for an upcoming school event. Most of the children were laughing and chatting excitedly as they shared brushes and supplies. But Sophia noticed Nathan sitting off to the side, staring blankly at the empty space in front of him. His hands were folded tightly in his lap, and the other students seemed to be ignoring him. Sophia's heart sank as she watched him shrink into himself, disconnected from the joy around him. At one point, a group of boys passed by Nathan's table. "Why aren't you painting, Nathan?" one of them sneered, his voice sharp and mocking. Nathan didn't respond, just stared down at his hands, his face turning red with embarrassment. Another boy shoved a paintbrush toward him, splattering paint on Nathan's worn-out clothes. "Here, do something for once," the boy laughed, but it wasn't friendly. Nathan flinched, his shoulders tense as he tried to wipe the paint from his shirt. The others kept laughing, and Sophia could feel her chest tighten as she watched. Later that afternoon, during recess, Sophia found Nathan sitting alone by the swings, staring at the ground. She approached him carefully, not wanting to startle him. "Nathan, are you okay?" she asked softly, kneeling beside him. He didn't look up, just shrugged his shoulders. "I'm fine," he whispered, though his voice was shaky. Sophia knew better. She wanted to wrap him in comfort, tell him that everything would be all right, but she didn't want to overwhelm him. Instead, she sat beside him in silence, offering her quiet presence as support. The rest of the day, Sophia couldn't shake the image of Nathan's tear-filled eyes and the way he had walked out of the classroom, trying to hide his hurt. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that Nathan wasn't just a shy boy, he was a child in pain, hiding it behind his silence. Her decision was made. She couldn't ignore this any longer. Nathan needed someone to step in, and if no one else would, then she would be that person, no matter the cost. The following day, Sophia decided it was time to take a step toward helping Nathan, even if it meant crossing boundaries she usually respected. During recess, she noticed him sitting alone again, and this time, she approached him without hesitation. "Hey, Nathan," she said gently, holding out her lunchbox. "I've got an extra sandwich. Would you like it?" For a moment, Nathan looked up, his expression guarded. He hesitated, but the look in his eyes told Sophia that he was hungry, hungrier than he would admit. Slowly, Nathan reached out and took the sandwich, mumbling a quiet "thank you" before taking a bite. Sophia watched him closely, trying to mask her concern. It wasn't just about the food. She knew that by offering something so simple, she was opening a door, inviting him to trust her. Nathan ate slowly, and though he said nothing, there was a shift in the air between them. Sophia could sense that this small act of kindness was more meaningful than it appeared. It was a step toward building the connection she knew he desperately needed. Over the next few days, Sophia found more ways to interact with Nathan. She'd stop by his desk during class, ask him how he was doing, and encourage him to participate in group activities. At first, Nathan remained reserved, but gradually, he began to open up, little by little, though never too much at once. He was cautious, but Sophia could see glimpses of a boy who wanted to connect, who was waiting for someone to care. The more she observed, the more determined she became to help him. One afternoon, as they sat together in the library, Sophia asked Nathan about his home life. "Do you live with your parents, Nathan?" she asked softly, trying not to pry too much. Nathan's response was quiet, almost a whisper. "No. I live with my uncle," he said, his eyes darting away from hers. Sophia felt a pang of concern, but she didn't push further, knowing he wasn't ready to share more. Yet, it confirmed what she had feared: there was more to Nathan's story, and she needed to find out what was really going on. That evening, Sophia reflected on her growing concern for Nathan. It wasn't just about offering him a sandwich or being kind in passing moments. She needed to take real action, but how? Was it too soon to report her concerns to the school? Would anyone take her seriously? Despite these doubts, she knew she couldn't step back now. Something was wrong, and if no one else saw it, she would have to be the one to dig deeper. Nathan was depending on her, even if he didn't know it yet. At the same time that Sophia was growing closer to Nathan, her personal life was becoming more complicated. Her relationship with Ryan had always been steady, but lately, there was a strain that neither of them could ignore. Ryan, who was used to having Sophia's full attention, had started to notice the changes in her. "You're spending a lot of time thinking about school, Sophia," he said one evening as they sat together in their living room. "It's like you're not even here anymore." His words stung, but they were hard to deny. Sophia knew he was right. Her mind was often elsewhere, wrapped up in thoughts of Nathan and the growing feeling that she needed to protect him. "I'm sorry, Ryan," she said softly, trying to bridge the gap between them. "It's just, there's this student, and I think he really needs help." Ryan sighed, rubbing his hands through his hair. "I get it, Sophia, but you can't save everyone. What about us? What about our relationship?" His frustration was clear, but Sophia felt torn between the two worlds she was trying to balance. The following days were filled with quiet tension between them. Ryan began to distance himself, retreating into his own activities while Sophia remained absorbed in her concerns about Nathan. Their dinners were quieter, their conversations more strained. Sophia tried to focus on both, but it felt like she was being pulled in two directions. Every time she thought about spending more time with Ryan, the image of Nathan sitting alone at school would flash in her mind. She couldn't shake the feeling that Nathan needed her in a way no one else did. One evening, after another strained conversation with Ryan, Sophia found herself staring at her phone, contemplating whether she should reach out to him or let the silence grow. She loved Ryan, but lately, it felt like they were drifting apart, and she wasn't sure how to fix it. "You're going to lose him if you keep this up," she whispered to herself, the weight of that realization pressing down on her. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't ignore the pull to help Nathan. Her heart was divided, and for the first time, she didn't know what to do. As the days passed, Sophia realized that she couldn't keep neglecting her relationship, but she also couldn't abandon Nathan. She would have to find a way to balance both, though she wasn't sure how. "I need to talk to Ryan," she thought, determined to make things right. But deep down, she knew that her connection to Nathan would continue to complicate her personal life. She wasn't just a teacher anymore, she was someone who cared deeply, maybe too deeply, and that was something Ryan struggled to understand. Determined to break through Nathan's shell, Sophia planned a small outing after school one afternoon. She offered to take him for ice cream, hoping it would give him a chance to relax outside of the school environment. At first, Nathan was hesitant, his usual shyness making him reluctant to accept the invitation. "Are you sure it's okay?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Of course," Sophia smiled warmly, trying to ease his worries. "Everyone deserves a little fun now and then." Slowly, Nathan nodded, and they headed to the ice cream parlor. Sitting across from Nathan in the cozy booth, Sophia watched as he carefully chose his ice cream flavor, his eyes lighting up in a way she hadn't seen before. "Do you like chocolate?" she asked, trying to start a casual conversation. Nathan nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth as he took a bite of his cone. For the first time, Sophia saw a glimpse of the child beneath the guarded exterior. In this simple moment, Nathan seemed more like the carefree boy he should have been all along. As they sat together, Sophia gently asked Nathan about his interests. "Do you like drawing? Playing games?" she inquired, hoping to learn more about what made him happy. Nathan shrugged at first, but eventually, he admitted, "I like to draw sometimes. My mom used to draw with me, before she left." The words hung in the air, and Sophia felt her heart sink. She didn't press him further, sensing that he wasn't ready to talk about his family. Instead, she let the conversation drift back to lighter topics, keeping the mood relaxed. Over the next few weeks, Sophia continued to find small ways to bring moments of joy into Nathan's life. She invited him to participate in class activities, encouraged him to join in group projects, and always made sure to include him in the fun. Slowly but surely, Nathan began to open up, his smiles becoming more frequent and his laughter more genuine. It wasn't a complete transformation, but it was progress, and Sophia cherished every little victory. Each time Nathan laughed or smiled, it felt like a step toward healing. Yet, even as they enjoyed these moments, Sophia knew there was still a weight pressing down on Nathan. There were things he wasn't saying, shadows lurking beneath the surface. But for now, she focused on the small joys they shared, knowing that it was these moments of light that would eventually lead them to the heart of Nathan's struggles. One step at a time, she reminded herself, watching as Nathan took another bite of his ice cream, his eyes brighter than they'd been in weeks. The turning point came unexpectedly one afternoon when Nathan, feeling more comfortable with Sophia, finally opened up a little about his home life. It was during art class, a subject Nathan had slowly started to enjoy. As the students painted, Nathan worked quietly on his piece, but Sophia noticed his focus was different today. After class, she gently asked him, "Do you want to talk about anything, Nathan?" For a moment, he hesitated, but then, to her surprise, he nodded. "I don't live with my parents," he said quietly, his voice barely a whisper. Sophia's heart ached as she sat beside him, encouraging him to continue. "I live with my uncle," Nathan explained, his eyes focused on the floor. "My dad. I don't know where he is. And my uncle, he doesn't let me talk about my family." The weight of Nathan's words hit Sophia hard. She had suspected that something was wrong, but hearing it directly from Nathan confirmed her fears. She kept her voice steady, though inside she was reeling. "Thank you for telling me, Nathan," she said softly. "I'm here for you." As they talked, Nathan revealed that his uncle, Parker, was strict in ways that felt controlling. "He says I shouldn't accept anything from anyone," Nathan muttered, glancing nervously at Sophia. The sandwich she had offered him days before suddenly came to mind, and Sophia realized how much courage it must have taken for Nathan to accept it. This revelation confirmed what she had feared. Nathan wasn't just shy, he was being kept in a situation where he was afraid to reach out for help. That night, Sophia couldn't stop thinking about what Nathan had told her. She sat at her kitchen table, her mind racing with the implications of his words. What kind of environment was he living in? Was Parker really looking out for him, or was there something more sinister going on? The more she thought about it, the more worried she became. Nathan had hinted at something dark, something that went beyond just being a strict guardian. Sophia knew she needed to act, but how? She didn't want to make things worse for Nathan by intervening too soon. The next day, Sophia found herself staring at the phone, contemplating whether to report her concerns to the school's administration. She knew she was walking a fine line. Intervening in a family's private matters was complicated. But the thought of Nathan going home to a place where he wasn't safe weighed heavily on her. Sophia realized that whatever she decided next, there was no turning back. She had crossed into territory where her instincts told her that Nathan needed more help than she could provide alone. A few days later, Sophia's growing concern for Nathan reached a tipping point when the school's principal, Alexander, called her into his office. As she sat across from him, she could sense the tension in the air. "Sophia," Alexander began, his voice firm, "I've been hearing that you've been spending a lot of extra time with one of your students, Nathan." Sophia's heart sank. She knew this conversation was coming, but she wasn't prepared for the stern look on Alexander's face. "I understand your dedication, but it's becoming too much. We need to maintain boundaries." Sophia tried to explain, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "Nathan is going through something difficult. I can't just stand by and do nothing." Alexander sighed, shaking his head. "I know you care, but we have protocols. You can't get too involved in a student's personal life, it's not our place." His words stung, and Sophia felt a wave of frustration wash over her. How could he not see the urgency of the situation? But before she could push back further, the office door swung open, and Parker, Nathan's uncle, stormed in. Parker's face was red with anger, his voice booming as he demanded to see Nathan. "I don't want him here anymore," Parker shouted, glaring at Sophia. "You've been interfering in my family's business, and I won't tolerate it." Sophia stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. Nathan, who had been waiting in the hallway, peeked through the door, his eyes wide with fear. "Please, don't make me leave," he whispered, clutching the doorframe. The desperation in his voice broke Sophia's heart, and she could feel the situation spiraling out of control. Without thinking, Sophia stepped between Parker and the door. "Nathan doesn't want to leave," she said firmly, her voice shaking. "Please, let's talk about this." But Parker wasn't listening. He grabbed Nathan's arm, pulling him roughly toward the exit. Nathan's small body tensed, and he looked back at Sophia with pleading eyes. "Help me," he mouthed silently, his face pale with fear. In that moment, Sophia knew she couldn't let this happen. But what could she do? She felt powerless, trapped between school policy and her need to protect Nathan. As Parker dragged Nathan out of the school, Sophia stood frozen, her mind racing with possibilities. Should she call the authorities? Should she follow them? Every instinct in her body screamed to intervene, but the rules and boundaries she had always respected held her back. The look on Nathan's face haunted her as they disappeared down the hallway. For the first time, Sophia felt utterly helpless, unsure if she had the strength or authority to make a difference in Nathan's life. That night, Sophia lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene from earlier in her mind. Parker's angry face, Nathan's pleading eyes, it was all too much. She felt completely defeated, like she had failed to protect him when he needed her the most. Her thoughts raced, questioning every decision she had made. Maybe Alexander was right. Maybe she had crossed a line by getting too involved. But even as she tried to convince herself of that, the memory of Nathan's fearful expression made her heart ache. She knew deep down that this wasn't over. The following day at school felt eerily quiet without Nathan there. His absence was a weight that Sophia carried with her through every class, every interaction. She couldn't focus on her lessons, her mind consumed with worry about where Nathan was and how he was being treated. As the hours dragged on, the guilt only deepened. "I should have done more," she whispered to herself during her lunch break, her hands shaking as she sipped her coffee. The uncertainty was unbearable, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was happening to him. Sophia tried to confide in her colleague Sylvia, hoping for some reassurance. "I feel like I've lost him," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I don't know if he's safe." Sylvia listened quietly, her brow furrowed in concern. "You did everything you could, Sophia. You care, and that's more than most would do." But her words, though kind, didn't bring the comfort Sophia hoped for. The image of Nathan being dragged out of the school haunted her, and nothing could quiet the fear gnawing at her insides. It felt like everything she had worked for was slipping through her fingers. That evening, as she sat in her kitchen, the silence of her apartment only made the feeling of defeat more pronounced. The sound of the clock ticking echoed in the room, reminding her of how little time she had left to act. Every second that passed felt like a missed opportunity, another chance slipping away. She considered going to the authorities, but she had no solid proof, no clear evidence of wrongdoing. What if Parker was right, and she was meddling in something that wasn't her business? But the thought of doing nothing was unbearable. As the night wore on, Sophia found herself at a crossroads. She had never felt so powerless, so completely at a loss for what to do next. The walls of her apartment seemed to close in around her, amplifying the weight of her helplessness. She knew she couldn't let this be the end. There had to be something more she could do. But as she sat there, alone in the dim light of her kitchen, it felt like all hope had slipped through her fingers, leaving her with nothing but doubt and fear. The next few days passed in a blur of uncertainty and despair. Sophia found herself going through the motions at school, but her mind was always somewhere else, always with Nathan. She had never felt so powerless before. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had failed him, that by not doing enough, she had left him vulnerable. Each night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering where he was and whether he was safe. The guilt weighed heavy on her, like a stone in her chest. Sophia's conversations with Ryan had grown even more strained. "You're not yourself, Sophia," he said one evening, his voice filled with concern. "You've been distant for days, and I don't know how to help you." She sighed, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on her. "I don't know how to help me either," she admitted quietly. Ryan tried to comfort her, but nothing he said could ease the pain she felt inside. The thought of Nathan being in danger, and her being unable to protect him, was too much to bear. One afternoon, Sophia decided to take a drive, hoping the open road would clear her mind. But as she drove, every familiar landmark reminded her of the place she was stuck in, emotionally and mentally. She passed the ice cream parlor where she had taken Nathan, the school where she had tried to reach him, and each memory only deepened her sense of failure. By the time she returned home, Sophia felt more lost than ever. The road that had once brought her clarity now felt like a path with no end, no solutions in sight. In a moment of desperation, Sophia picked up the phone and dialed Alexander's number, hoping for some kind of support. But as soon as he answered, she knew it was futile. "Sophia, you need to let this go," Alexander said firmly. "You've done what you can, but you can't save every student. It's not your responsibility." His words, though practical, felt like a slap to the face. She hung up the phone, her heart heavy with frustration and defeat. How could she let it go when everything in her screamed that Nathan needed her? That night, Sophia sat in the darkness of her living room, the silence deafening. She couldn't escape the overwhelming sense of loss of control, of hope, of purpose. It felt like she had reached the lowest point, a place where no amount of effort could fix what was broken. She had always prided herself on being someone who could make a difference, but now, it felt like she had failed the one child who needed her the most. Tears filled her eyes, and for the first time in a long while, she let them fall. Sophia spent the day driving around town, unsure of what she was looking for but certain she couldn't just sit still any longer. As the afternoon sun began to dip lower, she spotted Parker's familiar, beat-up car parked in the town's main square. Her heart raced. This was her chance. She parked across the street, far enough not to be noticed, and settled in to wait. She didn't know how long he'd be inside, but she was determined not to leave until she had the answers she was looking for. Whatever happened next, she was ready. Minutes turned into an hour, and just as Sophia began to feel the strain of sitting still, she saw Parker emerge from a nearby shop, walking toward his car with bags in hand. She held her breath, sinking lower in her seat, watching as he loaded his bags into the trunk. He glanced around briefly, but didn't notice her. As he got into his car and drove off, Sophia waited a few beats before starting her engine. Her hands were clammy on the steering wheel, but her mind was sharp with purpose. She would follow him, no matter where he led her. Sophia trailed Parker's car through the winding streets of the small town, making sure to stay far enough behind to avoid suspicion. Her nerves were frayed, her mind racing with possibilities of what she might find. Finally, after about 15 minutes, Parker turned onto a dirt road leading to a dilapidated house at the edge of town. Sophia pulled over a few hundred feet away, her heart pounding as she watched him get out of the car and head toward the front door. She recognized the house. It was the one Nathan had briefly mentioned during their conversations. With her pulse racing, Sophia waited until Parker had gone inside before stepping out of her car. She approached the house cautiously, her mind replaying the tense moments when Parker had dragged Nathan away from school. The front yard was overgrown, the windows dark and unwelcoming. She could hear faint voices from inside, a low, angry tone that she recognized as Parker's. Taking a deep breath, she moved closer to one of the side windows, peeking through a small crack in the curtain. There, in the dimly lit room, she saw Nathan, sitting on a worn-out couch, his face pale and defeated. Sophia's heart ached at the sight. She knew she couldn't just walk away now. She circled around the back of the house, trying to figure out her next move. The back door creaked slightly as she pushed it open, and she held her breath, hoping no one had heard. From the hallway, she could hear Parker's voice growing louder, and Nathan's soft, frightened responses. Sophia clenched her fists, determination flooding her. She had found Nathan. Now, she just had to figure out how to get him out of there safely. Sophia stood outside Parker's house, her heart racing as she tried to decide her next move. She knew she couldn't storm in, but she also couldn't leave Nathan in that house any longer. Quietly, she pulled out her phone and dialed Ryan. "I need your help," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I found Nathan, but I don't know how to get him out." Ryan, sensing the urgency in her voice, immediately responded. "I'll be there as fast as I can." "Don't do anything until I arrive," he said firmly. His calm tone was exactly what Sophia needed in that moment, grounding her. While waiting, Sophia kept a close eye on the house, listening to the tense exchange between Parker and Nathan through the cracked window. Parker's voice was harsh, demanding, while Nathan's responses were soft and full of fear. Each word cut deeper into Sophia, fueling her determination to help him. Minutes felt like hours as she crouched in the shadows, her mind racing with possible ways to get Nathan to safety. She knew Ryan's arrival would give her the support she needed, but every moment felt like a risk for Nathan. When Ryan finally arrived, his presence was a relief. Together, they quietly approached the house, deciding to confront Parker directly. Ryan knocked on the door, his firm demeanor steady as they waited. Parker opened it, surprised to see them, and his face immediately hardened. "What do you want?" he growled. Sophia stepped forward, her voice unwavering. "We need to talk about Nathan," she said, her eyes locking onto Parker's. "We know what's going on, and we're here to help, not to hurt anyone." Parker hesitated, his grip tightening on the door. For a moment, it seemed like Parker might slam the door in their faces, but something in Ryan's steady gaze stopped him. Slowly, Parker stepped aside, allowing them to enter. Inside, Nathan sat on the couch, looking smaller and more fragile than ever. His eyes widened when he saw Sophia and Ryan, a glimmer of hope flickering across his face. "Nathan, we're here for you," Sophia said softly, kneeling down to his level. "You don't have to be afraid anymore." Nathan nodded slowly, his eyes filling with tears as the weight of the situation hit him. As Parker began to explain, Sophia's understanding shifted. He wasn't the villain she had feared. In a broken voice, Parker revealed that he had been trying to protect Nathan from his biological father, Adam, who was a dangerous man. "I've been doing my best to keep him safe," Parker admitted, his voice rough with emotion. But I don't have legal custody. I've been hiding, running, trying to keep Adam from finding him." Sophia felt her heart soften as she listened, realizing that Parker's harshness had come from a place of desperation and fear for Nathan's safety. With the truth about Parker's situation out in the open, Sophia, Ryan, and Parker sat together, discussing the next steps. The weight of everything that had happened was palpable, but there was a sense of hope in the air. "We can't keep hiding," Parker admitted, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "Nathan deserves a life where he doesn't have to look over his shoulder every day." Sophia nodded in agreement, her heart full of resolve. "We'll help you get the legal support you need," she promised, her voice steady. Ryan chimed in, "I have a contact who's an excellent lawyer. He'll know exactly how to handle this." The following days were a whirlwind of action. With Ryan's connections, they quickly set up a meeting with a lawyer who specialized in family law. Parker, though hesitant at first, realized this was the only way to secure a safe future for Nathan. The lawyer immediately began gathering evidence, including testimonies from Sophia and others who had witnessed Parker's care for Nathan. As they built their case, the community rallied behind them, offering support and sharing their own observations of Nathan's well-being under Parker's guardianship. The town, once a place of quiet struggles, became a source of strength for Nathan's future. In court, the battle for Nathan's safety was intense. Adam, Nathan's biological father, contested Parker's guardianship, claiming his right as the boy's parent. But as the lawyer presented the evidence, it became clear that Adam's intentions were far from noble. The judge listened carefully to every testimony, weighing the gravity of the situation. Parker, though visibly nervous, spoke from the heart, explaining the lengths he had gone to in order to protect Nathan. When Sophia took the stand, she described the fear and isolation she had seen in Nathan, and how Parker's actions, though strict, had always been driven by love. The judge's decision came down to what was in Nathan's best interest. After hours of deliberation, the ruling was announced: Parker would be granted full legal custody of Nathan, and Adam would be issued a restraining order, preventing him from coming near his son. Relief washed over the courtroom as Parker and Nathan embraced, the tension of the past months finally lifting. Sophia, standing nearby with Ryan, felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. They had done it, they had protected Nathan and secured his future. After the court ruling, life for Nathan began to change for the better. No longer living in fear, he started to settle into a routine that allowed him to be a kid again. Parker, relieved of the constant burden of hiding, finally had the chance to be the guardian Nathan needed, without fear of being discovered. Sophia, watching from a distance, felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had been right to follow her instincts, and in doing so, she had changed the course of Nathan's life forever. Several weeks later, the schoolyard was filled with the sound of children laughing and playing, a scene that had become so familiar to Sophia. She stood at a distance, watching as the students enjoyed their recess, but her eyes were focused on one child in particular. Nathan was running around with a group of friends, his face lit up with a joy she had rarely seen before. His once reserved and anxious demeanor had melted away, replaced by the carefree spirit of a boy who finally felt safe. It was a sight that filled Sophia with an overwhelming sense of peace. Nearby, Parker sat on a bench, his posture relaxed for the first time in what seemed like forever. He watched Nathan with quiet pride, a soft smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Gone was the tension and fear that had once marked his every move. Now, he could breathe easy, knowing that Nathan was safe and that their future together was secure. As Sophia observed the two from afar, she felt a deep connection to this moment, knowing that she had played a part in making it possible. It was the closure she had been waiting for. Sophia took a deep breath, the crisp autumn air filling her lungs as she reflected on the journey that had brought them all here. The struggles, the doubts, the risks she had taken, all of it had led to this moment of calm. She realized now that being a teacher wasn't just about lessons and homework, it was about seeing the unseen, caring when no one else did, and stepping up when it mattered most. As she watched Nathan laugh with his friends, she knew that her decision to intervene had changed his life in ways she could never have imagined. For a moment, Nathan glanced in her direction, catching her eye. He waved enthusiastically, his face beaming with gratitude and affection. Sophia waved back, a warm smile spreading across her face. It was a simple gesture, but in that exchange, they both understood how much had changed. Nathan was no longer the frightened, lonely boy she had first met, he was thriving, and it filled Sophia's heart with pride to see him so happy. As the bell rang, signaling the end of recess, Sophia turned to head back inside. She took one last look at the playground, at Nathan and Parker, and felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. With a final glance, she walked back into the school, knowing that she had made a lasting difference, not just in Nathan's life, but in her own.